Hundreds of protesters took to the streets Sunday in Cuba's second-largest city, Santiago, demanding food and power amid a worsening economic crisis that has left many everyday Cubans with scarce amounts of each. In widely circulated videos on social media, Cubans in Santiago, in the east, can be heard chanting, "We are hungry," as well as calling for electricity and food. Some residents have experienced power outages for 18 hours a day or more. While there have been occasional outbreaks of protests in the past few years, they are still rare on the tightly controlled, communist-run island. Videos circulated on social media also show protests in Bayamo, another city in the east. Cuba has been grappling with a severe economic crisis, with shortages of food, medicine, fuel and power. Inflation has risen sharply, making many products unaffordable for Cubans who depend on an average monthly state salary of $16. Cuba has been under punishing U.S. sanctions for decades, which the Cuban government largely blames for their economic woes. The country's Soviet-style, centrally planned economy has also affected Cuba's economy negatively, according to economists. Cuba recently took some austerity measures, including a steep hike in the price of gasoline, which has left people nervous. Ricardo Torres, a Cuban economist and fellow at American University in Washington, D.C., said there is no quick fix for the problems Cuba is facing with lack of power, which requires the purchase of fuel, and the shortages in food, which the island mostly imports, unless one of its allies comes to its rescue with aid. Cuba should be talking about how to move away from its centrally planned economy and towards a market economy, Torres said. 2 or 3 economic measures only put a band-aid on the problem. The U and Cuba, which continue to have a tense relationship, have had a back and forth over the demonstrations, with Cuba blaming the U for fueling them. Following the protests, Cuban President Miguel Díaz-Canel posted on X that mediocre politicians and terrorists on social media got together in South Florida to try to fire up the streets. On Sunday, the U Embassy in Havana posted on X that it was aware of the peaceful protests in Santiago, Bayamo, Granma and elsewhere and urged Cuba's government to respect the human rights of the protesters and address the legitimate needs of the Cuban people. Cuba's foreign minister, Bruno Rodriguez, responded, saying that U government, particularly its embassy in #Cuba, should abstain from interfering in the internal affairs of our country and inciting social unrest. On Monday, Cuba's foreign ministry said in a statement that it had summoned Benjamin Ziff, the top U diplomat in Cuba, to a meeting with Deputy Foreign Minister Carlos Fernández de Cosio. According to the statement, Cosio formally conveyed his firm rejection of the government's interventionist behavior and slanderous messages.